You're listening to Bob Harden, streaming live online at bobharden.com.
Thanks so much for joining us here on the show. It's brought to you in part by Florida Weekly, your complimentary copy available at hundreds of locations throughout the Paradise Coast, as well as the Greater Naples Chamber of Commerce. Coming up, we're going to visit with Seton Motley. He's the president of Less Government. Right now, we have with us Dr. Zuhdi Jasser. He is the founder and president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. He's also the author of The Battle for the Soul of Islam. Dr. Jasser, thank you so much for joining us.
It's great to be with you, Bob. Thanks for having me back.
Always a pleasure, Doctor. Well, the President has announced his policy, somewhat a confused message to the American public from various spokespeople for this administration. But right now, ISIS is spreading like cancer in the Middle East. We've got a situation in Syria where the President is perhaps going to be forming an alliance with Syria and Assad. Perhaps not. We're not exactly certain about that. But what are your thoughts?
Well, it's just saddening to see the president, on the one hand, finally doing something militarily and acknowledging that the American military needs to should play a role in stopping evil as it spreads across the Middle East. But on the other hand, he really didn't lay out a strategy. I mean, he just at the end gave one line about the fact that, well, even if he has to bomb them in Syria, he will. Well, he talked about a cancer. The metastases of that cancer are in Iraq. The primary tumor is in northeastern Syria and Raqqa. And every report from the Wall Street Journal, from defense specialist intelligence, is that Assad, for the last year, hasn't even touched ISIS because he has been busy dropping barrel bombs and decimating and massacring tens and hundreds of thousands in the major cities of Syria, and has left northeastern Syria alone because in many ways the battle against ISIS has allowed him to legitimize a military regime. So not only should Assad not be part of the solution, any type of effort against ISIS is going to have to target, at least make sure Assad, that stays out of the picture, because recently you saw Assad told the United States, you will not bomb in Syria, and he's making a big deal out of America doing anything there because he realizes, on the one hand, ISIS is his enemy. On the other hand, he gets rid of ISIS, we get rid of ISIS, and the Free Syria Army can focus on him alone, because right now the Free Syria Army is divided in its fronts and battling two fronts against the primary Syrian army, the Ba'athists, and also against ISIS. So the president really gave no understanding. He should have mentioned Assad more than the once he did. Assad is a primary tumor in addition to ISIS, and really didn't lay out what a vision he should have in the Middle East. And he was too busy being the excommunicator-in-chief and telling us what is and what is not Islamic.
Right. Speaking of which, and I'm paraphrasing now, I don't have an exact quote, but he said something to the effect that this is an abomination, that what they're doing is awful. This is not a religious group. These are just terrorists. And not acknowledging the fact that it's Islamic jihad.
And he really, by doing that, as much as you could probably make the argument he's trying to be kind to Muslims so that we're not generalized as all being a band of murdering barbarians, the bottom line is that he's actually preventing the very reforms he claims, Islam is moderate. He removes the anti-Islamists from the table by allowing the Islamists to claim what is and what is not Islam. He takes a page out of the Book of Care, the Council on American Islamic Relations, that says ISIS is anti-Islamic or un-Islamic. But by doing that, they don't acknowledge the fact that ISIS is a natural outgrowth of the Wahhabi ideology out of Saudi Arabia, out of the laws of Sharia and the way they convict and prosecute and persecute moderate Muslims and Christians and Yazidis and other minorities in Pakistan and Iraq and Egypt and elsewhere. That these are all, in Sudan, the woman who was imprisoned, Miriam Ibrahim, because she converted to Christianity. These are all the same laws that ISIS is basically brazenly doing frontally. And if we're going to confront those, which are all byproducts of the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, those 56 countries that are autocracies and theocracies, if we're going to confront and reform those, the only way to give reformists like our organization, our coalition, a seat at the table is to say it may not be our Islam, but it is a Islam that needs reform. And Muslims who are moderate are not only against the Islamic State, but against all Islamic states. And he doesn't even let us have that conversation.
In my mind, it even goes further because you did a great documentary. You did the narration for the Third Jihad, which demonstrates that we have Islamic Jihad alive and well right here in the United States on several fronts. And until we acknowledge the fact that it's a problem, how can we acknowledge that it's happening right here?
Exactly. I mean, it's the other thing I mentioned on Fox the other day was he was functioning as the enabler in chief. In that, if Islamism is an addiction that needs to be treated, you need a 12-step program. The first step is getting beyond the denial and acknowledging we have a problem, and that this is a Muslim problem that needs a Muslim solution. And if the leaders of the free world, led by President Obama, will not even allow us to acknowledge that this is an Islamic problem that needs a solution, you're enabling continued whack-a-mole programs all over the world as we try to stay safe. You're enabling a prevention of confronting countries like Saudi Arabia and Egypt and other major leading Islamist ideologues by telling them, oh, no, these terrorist offshoots are your enemy too, and you have nothing to do with their ideology. Meanwhile, Al-Qaeda and 9/11 came out of Saudi Arabia. Militant groups come out of Egypt and Pakistan, all fed by these dictators that feed Islamism as an ideology.
Yeah, I want to commend your book, The Battle for the Soul of Islam, a terrific read on several fronts, one of which is, of course, just your very transparent revelation of your own faith. So again, the name of the book is The Battle for the Soul of Islam. Also, the American Islamic Forum for Democracy. I believe the website is aifdemocracy.org, aifdemocracy.org. Visit that and find out more about Dr. Jasser's movement and what he's working to accomplish. And then finally, go to YouTube and take a look at The Third Jihad, narrated by Dr. Jasser. Unbelievable revelation of what's really happening here in the United States. Dr. Jasser, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Bob. Appreciate it.
My pleasure indeed.